You will spend your entire life trying to grow into the person you want to become. Yet most of what holds you back will come from one place you rarely look into: yourself. Every dream you gave up on, every habit you couldn't change, every time you said, "I'll start tomorrow," wasn't blocked by the world outside. It was held back by an invisible force within you. But the moment you learn how this inner force works, your life changes direction. You stop sabotaging your own progress. You unlock self-trust, emotional intelligence, and a version of yourself you've never been able to access. This is the promise of The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. So in this video, you'll discover the hidden mechanism behind your self-sabotage and how to transform it into growth. Act 1. The mountain inside you. Every day you feel it, that quiet heaviness you never talk about. So you scroll, you distract yourself, you whisper to your mind, just 5 more minutes, because there's something you should do today. A conversation you keep avoiding, like telling your partner you're not happy anymore. A decision you don't want to face, like quitting a job where you feel invisible. A step you know would change everything, like finally launching the project you've talked about for years. You think about doing it, but just imagining it twists your stomach. So you push it to later. But later never comes. And this tiny, invisible habit slowly becomes the biggest mountain in your life. The mountain blocking your life isn't the world. The mountain is inside you. It's built from the needs you never learned to meet, the emotions you avoided, and the fears shaped by your past. This is self-sabotage, and it's the reason we fail to reach our potential. Most people think self-sabotage means laziness or lack of discipline. In reality, it exists because your subconscious believes it's protecting you, not from success, but from change, which it interprets as danger. Carl Jung explained that your unconscious mind will do anything to keep you inside what feels familiar, even if that familiar place is miserable. This creates an invisible conflict between two versions of you: the part of you that wants to grow, and the part of you that wants to stay safe. And that tension is what creates the mountain inside you. Just like real mountains form from pressure beneath the earth, your internal mountain forms from the emotional pressure you've been carrying for years. But self-sabotage rarely looks dramatic in everyday life. It feels comforting, like staying wrapped inside your comfort zone. It shows up as perfectionism. You don't start because you can't stand the idea of being imperfect. Avoidance. You avoid the conversation, the task, the decision, convincing yourself it's not the right time. Overthinking. You replay every scenario until you convince yourself not to try. Constant restarting. New job, new relationship, new environment. Not for adventure, but to escape the truth you're scared to face. Pride. You stay stuck because changing would mean admitting you need help. In real life, sabotage looks like this. You leave the job application open but never click submit. You stay in a relationship that drains you because facing the unknown feels more frightening than staying unhappy. You plan a new habit every Sunday and abandon it every Wednesday. You dream about a new future but behave exactly like the old one. But the real impact of self-sabotage isn't in how it looks. It's in the silent damage it creates over time. Every time you avoid something that matters, a part of you quietly shrinks, piece by piece. You lose self-trust, opportunities, confidence, and slowly you feel stuck in a life you didn't choose. A life built from fear instead of self-trust. The worst part? The more you sabotage, the more you believe you're the kind of person who can't change. And a fixed identity forms. I'm just not disciplined. I'm not confident. I always ruin things. I'm scared of everything. But those aren't who you are. They're symptoms of needs and fears you haven't uncovered yet. This is why Brianna Wiest says everything begins with honesty. It's easier to blame life than to face the fears and beliefs that built the mountain inside you. But honesty means acknowledging that your responses come from within, and that self-sabotage isn't your enemy, but a protective part of you reacting to old wounds. When you stop resisting your emotions and start listening, you finally understand what you truly need. And once those fears and unmet needs come into the light, the cycles around them begin to fall apart. So what's the first practical step? Write. Write what isn't working. Write your fears. Write your patterns. Write the things you avoid saying out loud. Writing creates distance. It pulls the fear out of your head and puts it on the page. The shapeless fear becomes a form you can finally work with. And something shifts. For the first time, the mountain inside you takes shape. Not as a vague feeling, but as a real structure built from fear, avoidance, perfectionism, and all the patterns you've been carrying for years. You finally see the obstacle for what it is. But seeing the mountain isn't enough. To climb it, you need to understand the hidden mechanism that keeps rebuilding it every time you try to change. Act 2. The hidden cycle that shapes your life. Before we take our first step upward, we need something essential for the climb. A map. Not a map of the mountain, but a map of what's holding it up. Because every internal mountain is supported by a repeating psychological loop, a pattern so familiar, you mistake it for your personality. On the surface, it looks like hesitation, procrastination, overthinking. But underneath, it's the same root mechanism rebuilding your problems again and again. This is the hidden cycle. And until you see it clearly, every attempt at change pulls you back into the version of yourself you're trying to move beyond. So how do you recognize this loop? It shows up quietly in small, forgettable moments. You know what you don't want, but have no idea what you do want. You avoid problems instead of confronting them. You try to impress people who don't even value you. You care more about looking happy than being happy. You wait for someone to save you. You chase goals you never asked yourself if you truly wanted. These behaviors feel disconnected, but they're all expressions of the same cycle, a loop that keeps giving you the same emotional outcome, no matter how different the situation looks on the surface. New job, same doubt. New relationship, same fear. New goal, same hesitation. From the outside, life changes. Inside, nothing changes. So what is this loop that keeps pulling you back? It always follows the same pattern, a core emotional need or fear that goes unmet. So your subconscious creates a protective behavior to keep you safe. That behavior sabotages your progress. The sabotage reinforces your old identity. That identity strengthens the original fear, and the loop restarts. So if you stay stuck in a life you don't like, don't assume you're weak. You're just protecting yourself from the emotions you never learned how to face. And those emotions are always the same. Feeling unworthy, feeling unsafe, feeling stuck, feeling like you'll lose something if you try, feeling like you're not enough. So let's break down how this protection actually works. Your mind creates protective behaviors, and each one carries a message you're meant to decode. Overworking might be a way to escape loneliness. Overspending might be a way to feel briefly alive. Seeking validation might hide dissatisfaction with your career or relationships. And once you look beneath these behaviors, the pattern becomes obvious. When overworking becomes your only purpose, you end up sabotaging the relationships that would actually make you feel less alone. When overspending becomes your way of feeling alive, you sabotage your long-term stability and create chaos that keeps you stuck in the very life you're trying to escape. When validation becomes your way of avoiding dissatisfaction, you sabotage your self-trust because your identity becomes dependent on approval. So your behaviors aren't random, they're emotional echoes, the inner reactions you've been trying not to confront. But there's an even deeper layer beneath all of this. The hidden rules your mind has been following for years. Brianna Wiest calls these unconscious commitments. There are emotional contracts you never meant to sign. A commitment to safety, avoiding risk because failure feels dangerous. A commitment to control, blocking intimacy because vulnerability feels threatening. A commitment to familiarity, clinging to what you know even when it limits you. These commitments feel like your personality, but they're not. They are defense mechanisms you built years ago, and they quietly dictate your choices, your relationships, your identity, your entire life. So you don't repeat the same behaviors because you want to. You repeat them because your mind is following rules you never realized you agreed to. These commitments keep the cycle alive until you finally uncover them. So how do you expose the loop running your life? You ask yourself, what situations trigger the strongest frustration or sadness? What problems keep repeating no matter how hard I try to change? What fear sits beneath my reactions? What do I say I want, but push away the moment it gets close? These questions reveal the real architecture of your internal mountain. And once you see the cycle clearly, it finally becomes a map. Your emotions stop feeling random. They become signals pointing toward what needs to change next. It's at this moment that the mountain begins to speak. And to climb higher, you need to learn how to listen, because your emotions are the compass that guides your next step. Act 3. Your emotional signals. Picture yourself. You're holding everything together. At work, you smile. With friends, you pretend you're fine, but one small trigger, a mistake, a comment, a memory, and suddenly your chest feels heavy. You feel overwhelmed, and then ashamed for feeling overwhelmed. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just move on? So you do what you've always done. You suppress it, you judge it, you run from it. But the author explains something completely different. Your emotions aren't threats, they're signals. Signals pointing at the exact places in your life that needs attention. The problem is never the emotion, it's not knowing what the emotion is trying to tell you. Most of us grew up hearing the same messages. Calm down, be strong, stay positive, just move on. So we pushed everything down. Slowly, we learned to silence our emotions instead of listening to them. But silence doesn't make emotions disappear. They wait and grow. And when they've been ignored long enough, they stop whispering and start shouting. That shout shows up as anxiety you can't explain, regret that keeps returning, confusion that drains your energy, or behaviors that make no sense even to you. Take anger. It often shows up when a boundary has been crossed. Sadness, when something meaningful has changed or been lost. Guilt, when a value you care about was violated somewhere in your past. Shame appears when your actions misalign with your values or self-image. These emotions aren't trying to hurt you, they're trying to communicate with you. But to decode them, you have to learn how to listen, and it always starts with a whisper. Sometimes the whisper's subtle, that quiet, something feels wrong, that instinct telling you a situation isn't safe, that discomfort you can't quite explain. But not every feeling speaks with the same voice. And this is where many people start to misunderstand what they feel. Some signals come from intuition, others come from old wounds, and some come from intrusive thoughts. And one of the biggest challenges is learning to tell the difference between them because they don't mean the same thing. Intuition feels calm, clear, and stable, even if the truth is hard. Emotional reactions rooted in past wounds create stress, confusion, and urgency. Intrusive thoughts, born from anxiety, feel loud, repetitive, and panicked. Learning the difference between these voices builds emotional intelligence. Because when you can't tell them apart, you misinterpret your emotions and end up doing things like saying yes when you mean no, staying where you're not meant to be, exploding at the wrong moments, staying silent when you should speak, repeating the same behavior again and again, and making decisions from panic, not purpose. So instead of fighting your behaviors, ask, what is this emotion trying to tell me? And once you understand the message, the next step is to meet your needs, not with surface-level comfort, but with actual care. In today's hyper-connected world, self-care gets thrown around everywhere. But Wiest pushes back against the aesthetic version of self-care you see online. Real self-care is much simpler and far more important because it meets your actual needs, getting enough sleep, building supportive relationships, creating a healthy environment, feeling emotionally safe, recharging yourself, and allowing yourself to feel what you feel. When your needs are met, self-sabotage loses its power because you no longer need it to feel safe. As Brianna Wiest puts it, understanding your needs and meeting them is how you break the cycle of self-sabotage. But once you begin listening to your emotions, once the compass is finally in your hand, the climb gets harder, not easier, because the moment you start moving upward, the mountain pushes back. And to keep climbing, you need something essential: climbing gear. The kind of inner strength that keeps you steady when your mind tries to pull you back into old patterns. Act 4. Build emotional strength. You wake up one morning and decide, today is the day you finally change something. You set a goal, you make a plan, maybe you even take the first step. Send the message, open the laptop, walk into the gym, and then, out of nowhere, everything inside you pushes back. Your thoughts slip out of your control. A quiet panic rises for no obvious reason. You feel anxious, uncertain, drained, as if your own mind is grabbing your hand and pulling you back into the old version of yourself. Wiest explains that this reaction is biological. Your brain is wired to keep you safe, not to help you grow. So anything unfamiliar, even if it's good for you, feels unsafe at first. And it's not just your brain. Your entire nervous system is built to maintain stability. It tries to keep everything predictable. Stable routines, stable beliefs, stable problems. This is homeostasis, your body's baseline. And when you try to change, your system panics. This doesn't feel safe. This isn't who we are. Let's go back to what we know. Brianna Wiest calls this the adjustment shock, the uncomfortable period between the old you and the new you. And this shock feels like fear, anxiety, hypervigilance, emotional exhaustion, second guessing, the urge to quit. These aren't signs you're failing. They're signs your brain is reorganizing itself, unlearning old patterns and building new ones. Growth feels chaotic because your system is losing the familiarity it depended on. When you don't know this is normal, you assume, if I'm scared, I'm not ready. If it's uncomfortable, it's not meant for me. And that's when you retreat into old habits that drain you, old relationships that don't fit you, old patterns you promised to leave. You start confusing comfort with safety and discomfort with danger. But the truth is the opposite. Discomfort is the signal that you're leaving the old version of yourself behind, the moment when growth is happening. But Wiest warns you can't transform your life in one leap. You do it in micro-revolutions because your brain resists abrupt change, but it adapts perfectly to small, predictable steps. Instead of quitting everything overnight or trying to become a new person in a week, do this. Leave work 10 minutes earlier, walk for 5 minutes a day, go to bed 15 minutes earlier, save $5 before saving $500, have one honest conversation a week. Small steps build momentum. Momentum builds identity. Identity builds lasting transformation. But even when you understand the process, the emotions behind it still try to pull you back. That's why the real breakthrough comes when you learn how to act, even when your emotions resist. First, separate your actions from your emotions. Your emotions are valid, but they're not commands. Your fear doesn't mean you shouldn't start. Your discomfort doesn't mean something is wrong. Your doubt doesn't mean you're incapable. So you can't rely on your emotions to tell you when it's time. You have to act before you feel ready, because action comes first. Motivation follows. Second, choose growth over comfort. Humans are wired for comfort. That's why we stay in jobs that no longer challenge us, relationships that no longer feel right, and routines that slowly drain us. But growth requires discomfort. It requires releasing identities that used to protect you and becoming someone your past self wouldn't recognize. And finally, your fears point toward your freedom. Wiest says, your greatest fears are often the key to your greatest growth. Those moments of fear aren't setbacks. They're guides. They show you exactly where you're meant to evolve next. And when you finally follow that direction, something shifts. Worry becomes unnecessary. You return to the present moment, the only place where real change happens. Your mind recalibrates through grounding routines, logical reasoning, emotional regulation, micro shifts, self-care, and consistent alignment with your values. This is how change stops feeling like danger and starts feeling like growth. And yet, even with new strength, the climb still feels heavy. You can't climb higher while carrying the weight of your past. Old memories, old beliefs, old identities. To climb any higher, you have to set down the backpack full of rocks. Act 5. Break free from the past. Think about the last time someone told you to just move on. Maybe it was after a breakup. You nodded, smiled, acted strong. You told yourself you were fine, but late at night, something inside you still pulled you back. A memory, a feeling, an old fear you thought you had outgrown. The real problem isn't that you can't let go. It's that no one ever taught you how to face the moment life stopped feeling safe. Society pushes you to move on long before you've processed anything. So you bounce back too quickly. You force positivity. You pretend you're fine, but your past self doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It waits for you. It shows up in the reactions you can't explain and in the emotions that still feel too strong. Letting go begins with something counterintuitive. You must look back. The author recommends revisiting the younger version of yourself, the one who carried the weight you never talked about. You sit with them. You listen to them. You speak to them with the compassion they never received. This doesn't reopen the wound, it closes it. Because healing grows when you confront your inner conflicts, releasing impossible standards you set for yourself, dropping identities you built to survive, acknowledging the shame you hid, questioning the expectations you inherited. Letting go isn't losing who you are. It's releasing who you pretended to be, so you can finally become who you actually are. You let down the weight you were carrying, the old beliefs, the old identities, the old stories that kept pulling you backward. And when that backpack finally drops, something incredible happens. For the first time on this climb, the summit becomes visible. You see a version of yourself you haven't met yet, the future you're meant to grow into, and that vision becomes your North Star. Act 6. Building the future you actually want. At some point, you realize you're no longer the person you used to be, but you're not fully the person you want to become either. You've let go of old habits, old relationships, old roles you used to play. Yet part of your mind still operates from who you were. But you can't build a different future with the mindset that shaped your past. Indeed, you stay stuck because your inner world still carries the fears you once had, the limits you once accepted, the beliefs you once carried about yourself. Letting go of the past is essential, but it's only half the journey. You move forward again the moment you start creating the horizon you're walking toward. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is visualization. Supported by neuroscience, visualization gives your brain a new reference point, a new identity to move toward. Because your brain cannot move toward a future it cannot imagine. So you teach it. Instead of living from who you were, you begin making decisions based on who you could become. How does that version of me think? What habits will my future self no longer accept from me? What feels different in my daily life? Visualization is rehearsal. You're training your brain to recognize the future before it arrives, so you no longer sabotage it when it does. But visualization is just the first step. The real shift happens when you stop waiting to become your future self and start acting as them today. Your future self is someone who decides, sets boundaries, chooses priorities, cuts distractions, invests energy in what actually matters. To anchor this identity, Wiest gives 5 practices. Ask what your best self would do and do it. Be honest about your weaknesses. Be prepared not to be liked. Act intentionally, even in small ways. Commit to continuous inner work. This is how your future is built, through thousands of micro choices aligned with who you're becoming. But becoming this version of yourself requires 4 internal supports. 4 pillars that keep your new identity from slipping when the past returns. Pillar 1. Stop outsourcing your emotions. Validation is healthy. It helps you process pain. But when you depend on it, you lose your inner compass. If you wait for someone else to confirm your feelings, you disconnect from yourself. So instead of waiting for someone to say, "I get why you feel this way," you learn to say, "I see why I'm scared. This fear makes sense." Self-validation isn't self-pity. It's emotional intelligence. The ability to name your emotions without letting them run your life. It's becoming someone you can rely on. Pillar 2. Principles over inspiration. Inspiration feels great, but it disappears. Principles remain. They shape behavior, and behavior shapes identity. Wiest shows that identity is built through principles like these. Consistency beats intensity. Your environment shapes your habits. What you repeat, you become. Principles guide you on the days when you don't feel like changing. Pillar 3. Purpose isn't fixed. Purpose isn't a calling you find once. It evolves as you evolve. To find your current purpose, ask, what am I willing to struggle for? What does my best self look like when I close my eyes? What would I do if social media vanished tomorrow? Which activities come naturally to me? What is my ideal routine? What impact do I want to leave behind? Purpose emerges at the intersection of your skills, your interests, and what the world needs. Pillar 4. Let your emotions guide you. Your negative emotions aren't obstacles, they're signals. They reveal where you need healing, what you're afraid to face, which beliefs are outdated, where you're ready to grow next. You can suppress them, but suppressed emotions always pull you back to who you used to be. Or you can let them guide you toward who you're becoming. Everything up to this point, the healing of your past, the clarity about your patterns, the shift in your identity is building toward the final step, learning to lead yourself. Act 7. Self-mastery, becoming the leader of your own life. After everything you've worked through, one barrier remains. You still don't trust yourself enough to lead your own life. You hesitate. You react too quickly. You doubt the choices you make. And this creates emotional chaos inside you. But self-mastery isn't for extraordinary people. It simply implies learning to lead yourself, your emotions, your mind, and your behavior. And the foundation of self-mastery comes from emotional regulation, because emotions rise automatically, and you react automatically. So the loop happens quickly, you barely notice it. Mastery begins the moment you interrupt that loop. The author gives a 2-step process. First, acknowledge the emotion. Name it without judgment. Anger, fear, sadness, it's all information. Second, choose your response. Don't act from panic. Respond intentionally, not emotionally. It's a small shift, but a powerful one. This is exactly how to stop treating emotions as orders and start treating them as signals. Once you stop being ruled by emotional impulse, something powerful happens. You begin to trust yourself again. Self-trust grows each time you stay calm long enough to choose the wise response instead of the response your past self would choose. And that self-trust is what gives you inner peace, a deep calm that doesn't disappear when things go wrong. Inner peace is built through daily mental strength. Daily strength looks like this. Stay humble. The world doesn't revolve around you. Remember, you don't know everything. Certainty is often an illusion. Ask for help when needed. Vulnerability is a form of strength. Make plans. Structure reduces chaos. Take responsibility for your choices. Stop letting others decide for you. Manage complex emotions. Clarity comes from emotional awareness. Self-mastery is consistency. And as you build that consistency, your emotional world becomes clearer. Each feeling starts to make sense. Anger points to crossed boundaries. Fear highlights where you feel exposed. Sadness shows you what needs space. Guilt reveals what truly matters to you. These emotions map out your inner landscape. And once you understand what they're pointing to, you can choose the response that aligns with your values instead of your impulses. From here, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What strength is this shaping in me?" Your growth ripples outward. Your relationships improve. Your presence becomes grounding. Your life starts influencing others. Every step you take up your mountain shapes not just your future, but the world around you. There is no final summit, no perfect version, no moment where you're done. Your life becomes meaningful because you keep choosing growth over fear. This is self-mastery. This is the climb. This is the moment you step into the person you were always meant to become.